This morning's reading is taken from John chapter 13, starting at verse 31. When he was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I told the Jews, so I tell you now. Where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another."
Jesus said, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another." I hardly need to make the connection with Christian Aid. Love is only real if we put it into action, and that's precisely what Christian Aid does. And it's called Christian Aid because it's one way in which we as Christians in this country, because Christian Aid is a British organisation, one way in which we as Christians show that our love for people suffering in other parts of the world is a real love, by helping them in practical ways. And we'll see that, an example of that, a little bit later. But first, a couple of thoughts about the reading that Nicola has just read for us. We're familiar, I'm sure, with the fact that in actually Matthew's and Mark's Gospels, Jesus summarises the whole of the Jewish law and God's instructions to the prophets in the Old Testament in 2 commandments: that we should love God with all our heart and soul and mind and strength, and love our neighbours as ourselves. But in the passage that we've just heard, Jesus says that he's giving his disciples a new commandment. So what's new about this commandment that he gives in that passage? Perhaps knowing the context helps a little bit. It's Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples before he's arrested and crucified. And he knows what's going to happen to him. And he's just given his disciples an example of what it means to follow him. He's taken the role of a servant and he's washed his disciples' feet. And so the crucial difference, I think, in the words, "love one another as I have loved you," is that this isn't just loving other people as much as we love ourselves. It's loving other people as much as Jesus loves us, and of course, as much as Jesus loves everybody else as well. And that's a humble and a costly love. It means seeing ourselves as servants and going beyond what is simply comfortable. Following Jesus, it seems to me, takes the call to love to a new level. So, what about Christian Aid? Russian forces invaded Ukraine 80 days ago on the 24th of February. And since then, of course, the war in Ukraine has been on the news and in our prayers, I think probably every day. And many of us, I'm sure, have donated to help the situation and help the plight of the people suffering in Ukraine, perhaps through the Disasters Emergency Committee appeal. It's not too late, it's still up there, and Christian Aid is one of the charities that is involved in supporting that appeal. And a few people, of course, are going further and offering their homes to welcome refugees. And that, it seems to me, is costly love in action. And you can see in the picture one particular refugee family, at least 2 members of it, hugging on the border, having just escaped into Poland. And it's obvious the relief that they feel. But of course, Ukraine is not the only country where people are suffering in the world. Another one where Christian Aid are at work is in Zimbabwe. And that's the country on which their publicity this year for Christian Aid Week is focused. And as you can see, one of the big problems in Zimbabwe is simply drought. Imagine trying to dig baked, parched ground like that to plant crops with the simple hoe that woman is using. And yet that is the reality for many, many people in Zimbabwe and, of course, many other countries throughout the world that are affected by drought. The reduced rainfall that's exacerbated by climate change. The map shows the countries that are most severely affected by the impacts of climate change. So the darker the red, the worse the effect. And Zimbabwe, if you don't know where it is there. So it's in a very dark region, very severely affected. And the war in Ukraine will make things even worse for those countries because food and fertiliser prices are going up, and therefore the poorest people will struggle even more. Meet Jessica. She is one of the people in Zimbabwe who has been struggling. And meet her 4 children, whom she struggles to feed. Some days, all she can offer them is 1 bowl of porridge. Her husband sadly is ill, and so she is the breadwinner and the only one who can work the land, or at least the only adult who can work the land, because her family help. In the words of Christian Aid, Jessica's love for her family gives her courage to stand strong against the threat of drought. My children give me the power to go ahead, she says. I pray they have a better future. And they will, now that they are linked with Christian Aid. So meet Janet and part of her family. And as we'll hear a little bit later, her family is considerably bigger than Jessica's, something like 10 times as big. And she and her family have had help from Christian Aid by being given access to drought-resistant crops and being shown how to store precious water more effectively to water their crops and how to farm more efficiently. And there is Janet watering her crop of beans. As a result, their lives have been transformed. And so let's hear and see Janet's story.
Meet Janet Zirugo, mother of 10, grandmother of 28, great-grandmother of 8. The 4 generations of Janet's family. Junior Kadore, great-grandson. Patience Muzengeza, granddaughter. Chipo Zirugo, daughter. Janet Zirugo. Janet's love for her family keeps her going, even in the hardest times. Janet has seen many changes in her lifetime.
When we were children, we didn't worry about the challenges ahead.
Janet has lived through extreme hardship. Drought has ravaged her village, leaving her community hungry.
In the drought, we ate things we wouldn't normally eat. My heart was so painful thinking that my family would die. By God's grace, they did not.
Thanks to kind people like you, Janet was given training and drought-resistant seeds. Janet has learned the best techniques to farm in dry land, and her garden has flourished.
This project has changed our lives for the better. What makes me happy is to see my family strong and well fed.
Janet has become successful through the opportunities she has seized. She is now able to provide for her family.
I take them to school because I dream that if they have a good education, they will look after me in the future.
God be with me and my family. Please look after them, Lord. Look after my livestock, my husband, and me too. Give me strength to fend for my family.
Well, I think a very powerful example of the way in which the work of Christian Aid makes God's love real for people and transforms people's lives. Very encouraging. Here is an example of the variety of fruits, the crops that Janet and her family can now produce. I particularly like the picture in the top right of Teonga with his arms full of sweet corn. Jesus said, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another." Supporting Christian Aid is one of the ways in which we show that our love is real. And so please support generously.